Welcome to Thoughts, Sophie Scholl, The Final Days. A very quick off-topic message, and this is not directed at anyone in particular, just please take Corona seriously. Wherever you are, whoever you are, please don't do anything that risks you or anyone else getting infected, if at all possible. And like with U571, I promise I am not doing this movie now specifically because of Corona. You know, with that, one might think I chose something comforting. And with this, some might guess that I intentionally chose something set in just a few and closed-off locations with people who are miserable to be there. I have been planning to do this movie for a number of months now. It just happened that I got to it during Corona. Now, this contains spoilers. If you don't care about these disclaimers, I try to keep them short and relevant, but your mileage may vary. You can... Mileage. There we go. You can skip right ahead to the first section via the description box. You can basically go blind into this movie. I mean, basically all you really need to know... You need to know what Nazi Germany was like, but you don't need to know who the White Rose were. The first time I watched this movie, I had never heard of the White Rose or Sophie Scholl or just, you know, I was aware that there were groups during Nazi Germany that tried to fight from within, but I had never heard of them, and you really don't need to have. You're told all the things you need to know. And this is not a review, this is a series of, well, thoughts. Some of it is analysis. Usually I also do jokes. I'm not doing any jokes in this video, it's too serious of a subject. But yeah, you know, they're thoughts that I had while watching, those are in chronological order, as well as before watching, separated into the first two sections, time codes in the description box. I don't know for sure if I'm going to get to the final section of this one, because my various physical pains are acting up, so I don't know. But if I get to the final section, it's stuff that I think is worthwhile to get into on Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, IMDb, and Wikipedia. And before recording this vlog, I had read all of it, though I may have forgotten some of what I had read by the time of recording, since some of these I prepare for months ahead, so yeah. And if you're not interested in the contents of all three sections, I invite you to only watch the ones you are interested in. I would say I find, hypothetically, if I was someone else watching these videos I make as someone else, I would probably personally find the most engaging to be the first section, and sometimes there's better analysis in the second section. But obviously, I make the video with the intent that people are gonna enjoy it and find it interesting, so, but it's not gonna be equally interesting for everyone. This video is not me saying I'm smarter than you. The stuff I say in this video, I'm not saying that only I could or have thought of. It's just stuff that I want to talk about and think others would enjoy listening to. Now, let's see. Yeah, I think this is reasonable to get into. I made this video discuss an issue that doesn't affect me or doesn't affect me as much as it does certain minorities. I'm not trying to lecture those that it affects. In part, I'm speaking to others who are not in those minorities so we can better empathize with those minorities. And in part, I am expressing my interpretation of the material without claiming it's as valid as the interpretation of members of the minorities. I'm not sure how much I'm going to talk about how, Jews were persecuted under Nazi rule. Ultimately, the movie itself doesn't spend a lot of time on it either, but I might get somewhat into it, and, I wouldn't mind if I were Jewish, but I'm not Jewish. And I'm not telling you, if you are Jewish, I'm not telling you that I understand what it's like to be persecuted as a Jewish individual better than you, obviously. And sad to say, Jews are still persecuted. Not equally in all countries, but there is a level of, yeah, I'm not going to get too into it here. I'm specifically talking about the movie, but I mean, honestly, if you don't acknowledge that there is a certain hatred towards Jewish people for no other reason that they are Jewish, I'm not going to be able to convince you, and I'm not going to waste my time trying. Now, let's see. The reason I was able to watch this DVD is that my father owns a copy. I personally did not have to pay any money to watch this movie, so anything negative I say in this video, there's not going to be a lot of it. I'm not saying it out of bitterness for, like, money wasted or something. I am not 100% certain when I first watched this. I would say, I mean, it came out in the year 2005. There is a chance that it was back then, actually. I can imagine my father bought it pretty soon after it came out, so it may have been back then. I've watched it maybe 3 or 4 times since, and then again today, right before I hit record. I'm not really going to be criticizing violence and gore, but I do think that it's a good thing that this movie is not. I mean, there really is, technically speaking, essentially no violence. The only, we have descriptions of violence, we have implied violence, but we have no actual violence on screen, no visual violence. And I do think that was the right choice. I think it would have distracted and detracted from it, but saying that, I do want to clarify, this is not that I have a problem with violence and gore in general. The Thing is one of my favorite horror movies and movies in general, and I also love Cronenberg's The Fly, as well as Videodrome. I don't have a problem with violence. I just don't think that it's... I don't think it would have fit into this, although obviously when you are... The moment that there is violence in something, it is very reasonable to depict violence in many pieces of fiction that depict the Nazis, because they were a horrendously violent ideology, and as such it makes a lot of sense to show. But this movie is not, like, ignoring that. It's simply, it is more a battle of ideas, and ultimately the fact that the you know it is ideas that go against Nazism that is fought for, verbally argued for, by people who know that by doing this they are, I mean, they might as well, like, just, the Hans has a pistol. If he they are fully aware that they might as well use that pistol themselves to kill each other. They are completely signing their death warrant by engaging this activity. And at first they weren't intending to be caught, but that isn't so much my read, at least. And it is, I don't know for sure. I don't know the historical people more than in part what this movie presents, and having read some about them. But I get the sense that the reason they did this in secret was that they wanted to be able to keep doing it for longer, so that there was a greater chance of success, rather than that they didn't. It's not that they weren't, like, willing to stand up for their ideas. The you know the both Sophie talking to Robert once she owns up to what they've done, as well as ah, give me a second, the trial itself, when they talk, you know, they don't just let Roland Freisler walk all over them as much as he is just chomping at the bit to do so. They they stand up for their ideas there as well. Now, I try not to cry during movies since I appear on camera so soon after watching, and I believe it would be distracting to viewers if it was very clear that I had recently cried. This movie did make it very hard not to cry, and keeping in mind I've watched this movie a number of times, it wasn't that I had forgotten this stuff, it's just even watching, even rewatching, knowing these things are coming, it still really hits you. The parts that really, yeah, when Sophie talks about her Jewish teacher and the handicapped children, the goodbyes between Sophie and her mother, and the long live freedom, and finally the narration there at the end. So this movie was released, I forget exactly, I think I read how long it took to make, but anyway, it was released in 2005 after the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II. And I I don't think I really know the other work of the cast or crew. As far as I could tell, I'm aware that the actress who plays Sophie was also in Der Untergang, which, you know, obviously I've watched that a number of times. And if you would like to do so, I recommend my own video on it, which sounds terribly narcissistic, but I do think I did a good job making that video. I'm afraid I don't really remember. I think she's one of the secretaries. I'm not sure she has a lot of screen time, but I mean that is a movie with a lot of characters. Now, my own quote-unquote film critic rating for this is an 8 out of 10, and that is also my personal rating. So, let's see. This is the only movie I've personally watched about the White Rose, and I haven't really read anything about them that isn't on this movie's own Wikipedia page. Now, in addition to this movie, I have watched Der Untergang or Downfall, Napola Die Felche, I forget what it's called in English. I guess actually, what is that word in English? I'm not 100% certain. Keeping in mind I'm not a native English speaker. The Forgerers, I guess, is what it translates to. Yeah, anyway. And possibly others that I cannot currently recall, but it's possible that I will at some point watch, I believe, 1981, and if I recall, they made two. They made two movies, and they were about the White Rose. This movie is more focused on Sophie specifically, but she was not the only member. So, that takes us to the first section. Notes taken while watching. I want to get one quick thing out of the way before, so that I don't have to say it every time I talk about a scene. Excellent acting through this whole film. I don't think there's a single bad performance. Excuse me. I thought I got rid of that before I hit record. And, one of the first lines spoken is he still mad at me? And I'm not 100% certain if it's like a boyfriend, a fiance, or a friend, but that line shows that before the arrest, these are people who have completely normal problems. They're not superhuman. And Sophie reads aloud some of the flyer, which to anyone going into this movie not knowing exactly what it's about, immediately makes it completely clear. And, without that, them getting caught would not have the same effect. by the end of the movie, obviously you know what this group of people did, but I think it's good to really make it clear from right away. And I do think that this is a movie. I think you can. I think it may be beneficial to some people to watch this movie without knowing. If you, yeah, if you've never heard of the White Rose, you know what Nazi Germany was and what they did. I think it could be a good idea to watch this blind. Like I said, I watched this blind, and I didn't feel like the movie. It's easy enough to understand what's going on. You get enough information, and yeah, I think it can be. It's not supposed to be like. I'm sorry. The following is. I love American movies. Just to briefly, I could imagine if this had been made by Americans, they maybe would have tried to play it as like a twist that what is in the paper that is. I don't think that the filmmakers did it expecting that people didn't know. It's just to you know I it's good to hear before we see what they do, that we know exactly what it is that also the weight of the scene itself. They're sitting there, they're talking about what is are we really going to risk you know yeah, are we going to risk going to the university with these? And I yeah, before you have that, I think it's good to just briefly have, because from the moment you hear it, if you know anything about Nazi Germany, like literally these words got people killed. If you said this stuff in public, you would get killed. I forget exactly the details, but there was something about, like, I think just a cleaning lady who said to an acquaintance that what was it? She didn't think Hitler would win the war, or she thought she didn't like his ideas, or something like that. I forget exactly what happened, but I remember when I heard it thinking that's draconian, that's ridiculous, and that's so yeah, right away you understand these are people who are risking everything. I really appreciate the discussion about the idea of passing the flyers at the university. They all understand how dangerous it is, and great points are made on both sides. After one of one or two of them says that's you're going to get caught and you're not going to be able to get away with that. One of the others argues, we'll get away with it this and this way, and points out, I forget if exactly the order of these, but also points out there won't be any more envelopes. There's a shortage of paper. We have to do something to get this going now. And it really, I mean, it's a very different experience watching this movie, knowing that the war actually did, I mean, relatively speaking, it wasn't a war that lasted for an extremely long amount of time, although it did claim an absurd amount, millions of lives. I looking back on it, it like if they had known that the war would end after so little time, maybe they would have like maybe they wouldn't have gone to the university. Maybe they would have waited for envelopes. But in their mind, maybe this would keep going for like 20 years, 40 years, who knows? And it could lead to, I mean, it did lead to ruin, but yeah. And Sophie convinces them she should go with. They won't be as harsh talking to a woman. Also, if some of these lines are very, very different from what the English subtitles say, much less what the German says, please keep in mind, I have to translate. I don't have, My dad's DVD does not have English subtitles. I have to translate these words into English based on the, I have to get the closest approximation to some of these are difficult to translate, so bear with me, please. And he puts the stamps away, and we see that he does have a pistol. If he needed to, he could use lethal force, but they've chosen to try to argue instead. I'm not saying that other countries were wrong to use sabotage against the Nazis. In some instances, it was highly effective, and certainly you can understand hating the Nazis enough to commit sabotage, which it is something that, like, if you don't feel passionately enough about it, you're not going to blow up a railway station. That this is not station. Wait, tracks. Sorry, railway tracks. And did they also blow up railway stations? Anyway, these are obviously the actions of people who are in an extreme emotional state. But in some cases, words are more effective than bullets. Very tense and suspenseful as the two of them walk down the street heading to the university. And we see them place all of them, and I want to briefly say, I do think this movie does a really good job of keeping things visually interesting, considering that, I mean, at the end of the day, again, they're not going in there with guns. They are placing paper on the floor and pushing paper off the thing so that it goes flying through the air. Obviously, the shot of the paper, the flyers flying through the air, that is, a kind of cool image or such. But other than that, this could very easily come across as very banal. And honestly, if not for the consequences, it almost would be. And that's it was a challenge to get it to look interesting, and the music also does a great job. But yeah, the filming and editing and acting really, yeah. And then they point out, one of them points out there are still some in the suitcase, and they think for a few seconds before acting, knowing that this could change everything. They thought that they realize every single second they spend on this might be 1 second too many. And Sophie pushes one of the piles, and the moment is appropriately given weight. And to think, if only she had left the pile there, it would have been a lot less. I don't know for sure. It's hard to say exactly what the janitor did and didn't catch, but it is possible that if it had just been left there, the janitor and Nazis and Nazi sympathizers would not have realized, it's paper. And, they wouldn't necessarily have thought that there was something special going on. And let me think, the word is the suspicion. You don't suspect that you have to watch out for someone having done something wrong before you see evidence of wrongdoing. And yeah, you can very clearly tell the janitor basically considers himself a hero of the Third Reich, forever vigilant, catching vile enemies of the Reich, despite not being armed or having an army at his disposal, not that either were necessary in this case. And some might wonder why the two didn't try to outrun the janitor. The way I see it, there are a couple of things. For one thing, that would make them look guilty. And there's a very real chance they wouldn't be able to get away from him anyway, given that they are completely surrounded by students, some of whom might either be Nazis or be scared to be seen working against the Nazis. And if they run, they look guilty. And after all, in the eyes of Nazis, certainly there's no reason to try to escape investigation by Nazis, since they're completely fair, which, we of course know in real life that's absurd, but that is what they thought. They thought they were on the right side. And before Roland comes into the room, Sophie briefly looks out the window at the clear blue sky, realizing that freedom is something she may not see again for a very long time. Sophie does come across as genuine when she lies to Robert. I mean, right there at the start, where she says, I have, what do you say? Um, I'm a practical joker, I guess, is something, when she says, I pushed the papers off because I'm a practical joker, not because I wanted to spread a message. And Robert proves the flyers could fit in the suitcase perfectly. I really appreciate that, that it is very clearly, once you get to the trial, their mind is made up. It's a show trial. But the investigation, Robert, I'm not, I'm not 100% certain. Is it more? I'm gonna go with Robert. The Yeah, I realize it is a very personal way to talk about an interrogator, but the yeah, he he basically he does seem like he genuinely wants to find out the truth. He doesn't look at her and think immediately she must have done this. He listens to her responses and he tries to poke holes where he thinks he can, but he is trying to get to the truth. And Sophie does present a plausible story, having an answer to every potential hole in the story that Robert finds. She really must have thought of at least some of this before getting into the room with him, although some of it she might have come up with in response to stuff he says. And when Robert quotes, again, I'm just going to go with the guy giving the speech. This thing about, women should be birthing children for the Fuhrer instead of running around the university. Although women who are not beautiful, they'll have to settle for, again, just guessing here, basically people working for Hitler, but not Hitler himself, something like that. Obviously, Robert is trying to provoke her, since even by her going to the university at all, which she isn't denying, clearly she does disagree with that statement, and he's hoping that she's going to reveal that politically she disagrees with this speech, which was given by a Nazi. He's trying to track, track, trick her, trap her, and the basically, like, a lot of people who are passionate about politics, and I'm not, myself included, when someone says something very offensive that you know that is very clearly political, it can make us immediately, like, go into, like, really attacking the political, you know the ideology that promotes the offensive statement. And that's basically what he's hoping to do. He thinks this, over eager, silly young person, even, he probably thinks that the fact that she's a woman means, makes it even more likely that she's easy to trick. If he says that, that's gonna, and he pretends he accepts her story and even says maybe she will be able to take the trip tonight. And the communist prisoner says, if you have anything that incriminates you, I will flush it down the toilet for you. I'm a prisoner here myself. And Sophie walks into the cell, and it's very clear the fear of being in this cell for a very long time weighs on her. Looking at how small and confined it is, and just you know, people who design jail cells are very intentionally trying to break people's spirit. And she expresses concern for her brother rather than verbally despairing her own situation. And that is something that's very consistent in this. She has this, excuse me, I'm just gonna briefly, that's better. She expresses a lot of selflessness and empathy, and it's inspiring. It's inspiring. And Robert confronts Sophie about her father having done time, and her being, I guess it was the Hitler Youth or something like that. And as far as I understand, that is true. When she was younger, she actually did, you know, she didn't understand, but she just thought that he was making the country a better place. And that is something, I don't know with 100% certainty if that is something that was brought up during the interrogations, but again, it's something not everybody watching the movie is going to know that she was originally in the Hitler Youth, but that really does say the some of the things that Hitler did genuinely did disturb people who at one time had honestly believed that he would make things better. And that is a hugely different thing than someone. Her father did disagree with Hitler from fairly early on, as far as I understand, but he allowed her to have, he said, if this, he felt, if this is what she genuinely believes in, I'm going to accept that she believes that, and I'm not going to tell her she can't believe it. But she did come to realize that what Hitler did was monstrous, rather than that she, and there were people who did realize this, and some of them would genuinely try to, they would do things that would make, not all of them, it was not always flyers. For some, it was, for example, hiding Jews in their house, even though they knew they might get punished. Or sorry, if they were caught, they would be punished. The reason I said might is there was a chance that the Jews were able to remain hidden in there. And let's see, but yeah, I think that's a very important part of, we hear how passionately she does disagree with Hitler in, not in this same scene, a little bit later, and knowing that she used to believe in him, it really tells you that she came to this perspective honestly and based on new information, rather than that she was always against Hitler or was told to be against. And the stamps are put on the table. It's a very nice detail. The camera gives us a close-up of the stamps, and we can see, yes, that is Hitler's face on the stamps. Robert continues to give Sophie the chance to tell the truth, and then reveals that he knows she's lying. And she tries, she responds, I didn't know about the stamps, and of course my brother has a gun. He's a sergeant in the, or wait, sorry. It was someone else was a sergeant. Sorry. The yeah, let's see. But yeah, it really, on some level, I mean, he basically hopes that she will end up telling him the truth. I mean, ultimately she does also do that, but he you know, he doesn't, what's the word? I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is he, it would be easy for him to basically just make up his mind and then tell her this is what happened, and you're, you know, either you're going to sign a confession saying that that's what happened, or we're going to, you know, regardless, she's going to be punished. But he actually does give her a chance. He doesn't tell her that he knows the truth, but he asks her, and then when she says something that he feels he can disprove, he brings out the physical evidence that seems to at least disprove what she says. So he does give her the chance to, and a lot of the time he isn't even, like, there's a world of difference between him and Roland Freisler, for example. When Robert, he's not that harsh with her a lot of the time. He can be somewhat cold, but he isn't like constantly telling her that she's awful and such. And he does seem to, based on the movie at least, I think that if she had told the truth, he would have tried to get her a, you know, a less harsh sentence. And he genuinely, you know, he points out, I have a son, he's actually 1 year younger than you, and he gets wrong ideas in his head sometimes too. But he can empathize with her. He doesn't see a monster. He he sees a misguided young person who maybe could still be convinced of the truth, basically. And I do think that is interesting. I think they based that on the actual, because a lot of the script was based on the what's the word? You know, they wrote everything down, and those papers were made, you know, they were made available to the filmmakers. So, excuse me, yeah, I would guess that he did actually feel that way. And that is also, you know, the if Roland was, you know, within earshot, he would be furious that, you know, he would say, why are you're handling her with kid gloves? Why are you, you know, clearly she's guilty. Let's get on with this, you know. It truly is inspiring how long she holds out, how much she insists that she didn't do anything wrong or know about wrongdoing. And she's told, your brother has confessed. And and they do allow Sophie to go to the bathroom after she asks several times. And there she does allow herself to feel the weight, you know, the weight of the situation, which was something she didn't want to happen in front of the Nazis, of course. And she, you know, she talks to the communist prisoner. When my mother hears that we've been arrested, she can't take it. She's over 60 and has been sick for a long time. Again, we see Sophie's thoughts are with her loved ones and how they'll be affected by this rather than on her own situation. And the the reason I'm calling her the communist prisoner, I'm sorry, I simply do not remember her name. But yeah, again, the communist prisoner, does clearly want to help Sophie feel better. And Robert lists the various people implicated, and Sophie tries to avoid them being further implicated. According to you, the country is full of apoliticals and Nazis. Then you must be on cloud nine. And Sophie continues to fight to avoid implication and punishment for the other members of the White Rose. Obviously, she is smart enough to realize she herself is going to be punished severely, regardless of how much or how little information she gives on them. So, it's not that, but a lot of people would simply, out of fear, admit to everything up front. I'm not saying that those people are weak, but clearly she was an extremely strong person. And when Robert says that her fiance must know, since, borrowing money, and she insists that she and her brother are the only guilty parties, and we see her at the most determined in the entire process of talking to the Nazis so far. I have to admit, when the communist prisoner talks to Sophie about her fiance, asking, did he really not know anything, and are you sure about, that really did make me wonder if she was secretly a Nazi trying to gain her trust so that she would admit things. Sophie talking about the love of her fiance and how wonderful it was to be with him 6 months ago is also very humanizing, which is important for a figure that can, again, seem almost superhuman. She faced down the might of the Nazi, the Third Reich at age 21 with no guns, no bullets, armed only with ideas and conviction. And though she was killed, in the long run, she did win. And certainly according to the movie, I don't know if it may have, that may be fictional, but she does not seem scared or upset there at the end. She comes to terms with her situation, and she doesn't like struggle when they take her in to be guillotined. And yeah, an hour and 4 minutes in, and Sophie is now fully on the offensive, arguing her ideas against Robert. And I do think they make it very clear Robert really did believe that he was in the right. When she describes Nazi atrocities, he doesn't say that's nonsense, that didn't happen. He tries to argue why, he says, the Jews are, you know, the Jews are leaving on their own accord, and things like that, rather than, he doesn't try to deny, he doesn't tell her, you must be lying about the personal experience you're describing to me. He says, you are mistaken, you've misinterpreted what happened, and that is like, when someone believes they're in the right, they're more likely to rationalize. And when someone deep down believes they're wrong, they're more likely to lash out and call someone else a liar, and things like that, when faced with, you know, someone, something awful being done by someone that they claim is good. And Robert explains, due to Nazism, he himself has a higher position than he would have otherwise. And that is very true of Nazism. Some people like him, and some people who were even brutal, dangerous people, were given more power than before. You need look no further than the brown shirts. And I'm not saying that Robert himself was as violent and awful as they were. It's possible he wasn't violent at all. But that was one thing, the yeah, they took these people who were very willing to commit violent acts and told them, go commit violence, just do it in these places and against these people. Yeah, and so Sophie talks about the Jewish teacher and insists Jews are, they're no worse than any other. I forget if she uses the word race. I mean, back then, they did believe in the idea of race, so she might have said, they're no worse than any other race. And Robert responds with the, now proven to be a lie, the idea that the Jews were choosing to leave of their own accord, because that he needs to believe that, because if he accepts the idea that millions of Jews are being kicked out of where they live and face violence and persecution, suddenly he can't claim that he's the good guy anymore. And Robert offers writing that she acted based on her brother rather than her own volition, and she says, no, we can't do that because it's not the truth. And yeah, it becomes clear that Robert, at least by now, genuinely sympathizes with, by the scene I just described when she says that's not the truth. He genuinely sympathizes with her, and he's looking for ways to more or less save her, at least get her a lesser sentence, without giving up his own position, of course. I would do exactly the same thing if I had the chance. Your ideology is wrong. I accept responsibility and the consequences. And Sophie and the communist prisoner take cover during the air raid, and the communist says, it won't be long before you're free. And as far as I understand, this can't have happened because of the date and location. In the time of the interrogation and trial, there were no air raids over that particular city, as far as I understand. So that is fictional, but it is, you know, I think there is a chance that it, when in prison or jail, I always mix those words up. She, on some level, probably entertained the notion, maybe I will be able to get out, maybe the Allies will win the war before the sentence is, before sentencing or before it's carried out or something. She was told 99 days. So that is very realistic. And, obviously, having an actual air raid is something very visual that, if it was like a novel, you could just, I'm sorry, that sometimes people get the idea that I don't like books. What I'm saying is books as a medium allow you to do things that you have to do differently in movies, which is why so many movie adaptations of books are very frustrating for people who are fond of the books. In a book, you would have had something along the lines of, on some days, Sophie wondered if maybe the Allies would win the war before the 99 days were up, if she would in fact be saved, or something like that, basically. But in a movie, a visual really helps. I had honestly forgotten how short a section of the movie is actually Sophie on the offensive, defending her ideas when talking to Robert, because the scene is such an effective part of the movie that really just sticks with you. And I mean, really, like, if we were talking like percentages, I don't know, 4% or something of the entire movie, with, excuse me, maybe a good 10-15% of the movie taken up by her talking to Robert. You know, possibly more, but that would be my off the top of my head guess. It's so short, and obviously, how could it be much longer? Once she starts talking like that, it's like, well, my job is over. I'm not the one. I'm not the judge. I'm the one who. I'm just supposed to get you to tell the truth, and that is definitely what you are saying now. You definitely fully believe is the truth. I may not agree with all of it, but clearly you are not trying to lie to me. You're not trying to get out of the crime that you've been charged with anymore. And Sophie insists that her lawyer tell her what will happen to her loved ones, insists that she not get a more lenient sentence than her brother, again expressing her tremendous empathy and selflessness. And when she demands information from the lawyer, it very quickly becomes clear that he really isn't on her side or her brother's side. He is doing it only so that it will appear that they had a proper defense. It is a show trial, and when talking to her, he's not even going to pretend otherwise. At first, he doesn't walk into the room and immediately start saying, I hope they, I hope they do execute you. But the moment that she has the gall to actually challenge, it takes almost nothing before he gets there. He can barely restrain his hatred of those who do not agree with Nazis, and who even take it as far as trying to get others to disagree with Nazis. I appreciate that periodically we will be told what the date is, and I think it's only once that we're even told what time of day it is. I appreciate that we're told about Roland Freisler's past. It really does a lot to explain why he would put on such a show as a judge, which we do know. I believe documentary footage and, like, written down descriptions, that really was what he was like. And if you don't know, that is something in the movie that seems hard to believe. And I saw some, I forget, it might have, I'm not sure how many it was, but some in the IMDb, in their IMDb reviews, they said that they did, they expressed that they didn't believe that. They felt that it must be, like, that they're just trying to make, they're trying to make Nazis look ridiculous, basically, or over the top. But that really was what he was like. It's, my father, I forget if it's that he's seen the footage of the real Roland, or if it's that he's read the exact descriptions, but he said that it is exactly the way that he was in real life, based on what we know. Now, ultimately, there is very little in the movie that is for sure fiction. I already mentioned the air raid. I forget, there might be one, or there might be other things, but the IMDb goof section, does have some, yeah. But his behavior is not fictionalized. I appreciate that when Christophe is being questioned, we see Sophie and her brother react. This is a time where a director, a lesser director, might go for, like, focusing on the people at the all the Nazis at the trial, sitting and listening. And we actually, ultimately, there isn't that much footage of just them. It tends to focus on Roland, the the Scholls, Christoph, and also very briefly the lawyers, and And actually, I remember that the defense attorneys never ask, you know, that Roland, each time he's himself done with one of the, you know, the what's the word? I'm gonna go with suspect. I know that's not quite the right word. Every single time he's done with one of them, he asks, you know, the prosecutorial, yeah, do you have any questions? And they say no. And he asks the defense, and they say no. I remember that the defense ones said no. I had forgotten that the prosecutors also said no. It really is. They are they are there to make it appear that it's a trial. What it is Roland ranting at them, insulting them, yelling at them. To again, this is something that people who deep down know that they're on the wrong side. If you were sure you were on the right side, you wouldn't make such a spectacle of it. You know, again, Robert genuinely believed that he was in the right, but Roland deep down knows that, yeah. And yeah, and Roland continues to interrupt Hans, and Hans continues to argue his case, calm and collected, despite all the pressure. You know, he is surrounded by people who hate his guts, and he is completely calm and collected, and just, yeah. And I appreciate that we do see that Hans, Sophie, and Christoph do have different reactions to it, and you know, they are clear, distinct people. They are three individuals. They're not just this glob of, you know, anti-Nazi, you know, which I've seen well-meaning movies and such that try to, you know, like there are a lot of there are a lot of good guys who are shown to be stoic when facing, you know, pain. And in this, you know, Hans is stoic most of the time, and Sophie, basically, she maintains a calm demeanor, and she never really, like, she never misspeaks. Like that's something that, you know, if you're nervous, you might misspeak or something. And Christoph consistently is very sad at the idea that his children will grow up without a father. But yeah, I can think of movies where, yeah, these are, you know, it would have they would have all been basically the same, because, you know, there is an when you make a movie, basically you're either saying this is what it's like, possibly not in reality, but in this piece of fiction, and or this is what it should be like. And there, you know, obviously it is seen as an ideal if you can remain stoic in a painful situation, because a lot of people think that showing emotion makes you weak, and thus stoicism during a painful situation must by definition be strength. And I do think that sometimes the, you know, but in that situation very specifically, you know, Hans and Sophie know that the less they let the Nazis see that they're, you know, of course they're scared and sad. You know, we see that in other scenes. But if the Nazis see it, then the Nazis will feel like they've won, and they don't want that to happen. And again, I don't think that Christoph is weak. Again, the reason he is so upset is because he's thinking of his children. Of course, thinking about his children growing up without a father, of course that's going to make him upset. That doesn't make him weak. It makes him in touch with his emotions. Now, let's see. Right. Had to catch back up with where I left it off in the notes. Hans argues the war cannot be won by Nazi Germany, and Roland Freisler completely loses it. And Hans continues to be very calm and collected, patiently waiting for Roland to stop talking, sometimes even talking over him. And that, again, that is incredibly powerful. You know, Roland can scream and shout and, you know, insult and you know, all this, but Hans is not deterred. If you or Hitler did not fear our opinion, we would not be standing here. And Sophie is clearly emotionally affected as she argues her ideology before Roland Freisler, but still contains herself. And Sophie and Hans's mother and father get into the courtroom and say they want to, you know, just barely, they don't get very far into the courtroom, and say they want to defend them, but they're taken out without being allowed to. And there we do very clearly see, you know, Hans and Sophie both, they get up and they're basically about to run to their mother and father. You know, and essentially, like, logically, they know that's not going to happen. They're not going to allow us to be reunited with our parents in this show trial. That's not going to happen. But it is still, like, just reflexively, you know, when they see that their parents are there, you know, immediately the emotion wells up inside them and they want to be reunited with them. You know, the way I see it, basically they want to try to reassure their parents that it's going to be okay, more than that they think that, like, their parents are going to be able to take them back into safety. You know, but you know, there is a powerful drive to reassure loved ones. You know, if you feel like that you can reassure them, then yeah, you will soon be standing where we are standing. And Hans and Sophie both clearly consider what to say before speaking. And Christoph again asks his children not have their father taken away. Again, not thinking about himself, but his loved ones. You know, think of how easy it would, like, a lot of people would in that situation have said, please don't do this to me, I want to live. But no, they keep talking about their loved ones. Your reign of terror will soon be at an end. Today you execute us, soon you will be executed. And Sophie is told, you know, you should probably, you know, write quickly. And she asks, I thought everybody got 99 days. And again, she says, write quickly. And Sophie sits down to write, clearly very affected, incredibly well acted. And she writes to her fiance. And Sophie talks to her parents and tells them not to worry. Again, not thinking about herself. And her father tells her he's proud of them both. And Robert and Sophie look at each other again. Look at each other from across the hall. And again, clearly, he wishes she wouldn't be punished. He does have sympathy for her, even though he completely disagrees with her ideology. I really appreciate that they allowed Robert to be three-dimensional. Obviously, when you're portraying truly evil ideas, it is appealing to make the people out to be complete monsters. And Sophie is taken to execution. Her face doesn't suggest any fear. I appreciate that the movie doesn't show us the actual gore of the execution, as I've already gone into. long live freedom. And at the very end, we get brief text and narration explaining about the flyers from planes. And we see the visual of all these pieces of paper flying through the air from above. And, you know, it harkens back to the image of the flyers in the university, you know, again, flying through the air. And there is just something about it. It suggests freedom and free movement, you know, in a stifling, you know, system. And yeah, I think they did a really good job with that, because again, it's pieces of paper, you know. I mean, if it would be something if we saw like the bombing of a Nazi building, but no, it's pieces of paper flying through the air, you know. It shouldn't be effective, but it is, you know, both in the film and in real life. Second section, notes taken before watching. Excuse me. I think it's smart to open the movie with Sophie singing along to the made illegal by the Nazi Party, since they hated all that wasn't German American music. It accomplishes a number of things. We immediately get a sense that she is willing to break rules that she feels are wrong. Obviously, listening to the music is nowhere near as important a political action as spreading the flyers, but once she does that, the rest of the movie is going to be about the consequences of that. By showing us her listening to the music, we see that it is an ongoing character trait of hers. You know, spreading the flyers isn't done on a whim, and it also humanizes her. It shows that she likes having fun and gives the audience a brief, light-hearted moment. You know, think about how, like, this is a movie that ends with the execution of three 20-somethings because they spread pieces of paper. The idea that the first thing, yeah, the first thing you see in that same movie is two 20-something girls singing along to American music and giggling and such, you know, you don't expect that. And it's not, it it doesn't feel like outside of the tone of the rest of the film. It just feels like that was part of her life before she was caught. You know, yeah, the humanizing her and the let me think. Yeah, these are some very important things for a movie that is going to spend the vast majority of its nearly 2-hour runtime. You know, if you don't count the end credits, the movie is an hour and 50 minutes long. It's, you know, 55, 56 essentially with end credits, but yeah, with courtroom scenes and interrogation. I'm not saying the movie is overlong, and I definitely think flashbacks would have felt out of place. So I think it was the right choice to have the music there. I can imagine she actually did listen to music like that in real life as well. The I think, again, I love American movies. I think if this had been made by Americans, when Sophie explained, you know, when she's sitting there lying to Robert and saying, I was going to go visit my mother, you know, and I was bringing laundry, and I was going to go have, you know, have lunch with a friend of mine, but I went to cancel it, and all these things. I think a number of American filmmakers would have chosen to show that, basically, you know, have her say what she, you know, have her say the line, and then we see the actual thing, you know, almost as if it were narration, basically. And I can see an argument in favor of making the movie like that, but I do, ultimately, I think the movie, I'm glad they made it the way they did. Part of it is also that, again, I don't think the movie is overlong, but it is long. You know, if you felt like that this movie should be shorter, it would not be very difficult to trim it down. She, you know, the I mean, I'm gonna get more into that later, so I'm not gonna get into it here. I've made some notes that I don't want to forget to talk about, but the right. So yeah, you could trim it down. Right. I'm glad that the movie is long, not over long, and that so much of it is spent inside locked rooms where our protagonists, we empathize with the protagonist when I don't want to make blanket statements here. Not all movies are trying to make you. A lot of movies do try to make you empathize with the protagonist, and as such, when she is trapped, we feel trapped. And that's what the movie does. For nearly 2 hours, we feel trapped. We feel, and that is, I mean, ultimately, the last thing the Nazis did to, excuse me, the members of the White Rose were these executions and, various draconian punishments. I, I think not all of them were executed, but anyway, or was it the friends who were only with money borrowing? They were not executed. I'm not entirely sure. The that was the last thing they did to them, but the incarceration and interrogation and trial were also horrible. The execution might be the most horrible, and it was the last horrible thing they did to them, the last thing they did to them, period. But to the ones they executed, I mean, but at, at the end of the day, this is 2 hours of being locked up and interrogated and shouted at by Freisler and such for arguing against their ideology. This small group of young people chose to argue their ideology against the dominant ideology of the country, and those who had the power to do so chose to lock them up and execute them. And that really, essentially, you could tell this story very quick. You could make a short about this. You could tell some of the most important things in maybe 15-20 minutes if you wanted to be super quick about it. But it wouldn't have the same effect. The movie isn't tedious. It is the yeah, the exact word is not coming to me right this moment. Let's see. It's that I think it's not tedious, but it does feel you get a sense of the what's the word? It is legitimately, we feel like we're there with them. We feel like we spent, I I wasn't counting, but a number of days locked up, and then after no, with given so little time to say goodbye to loved ones, and then executed. And that's another thing. When the execution happens, the movie ends immediately, as if that really was, as if as long as Sophie is alive, the movie is still going, basically. Like, it's not her entire life. It's the last, the final days of her life. But those final days were long, grueling days, being treated like a criminal for trying to change people's minds, and that really is, sometimes you should let something hit the audience. You shouldn't be in a hurry to move on, you know. Yeah, I do think, and let's see. Yeah, I think an argument could be made that maybe the movie should have been more visually striking. As it is, it's almost like a theater adaptation. And some of those, such as 12 Angry Men, I'm talking, sometimes when I talk about that movie, I forget that there's more than one version. I'm talking about the original version. Crap. The Henry Fonda version. I don't remember exactly what year it came out. But yeah, 12 Angry Men do get visually appealing. I'm not saying that this movie should have been very visual by like modern filmmaking standards, but something more like 12 Angry Men, because as it is, it's obviously one thing that also has is that you have, well, 12 men who all at any moment could start speaking, where in this, a lot of this movie, it's not always the same two people, but a lot of this movie, it's two people talking. And I'm not saying that it's blandly filmed. I think the cinematography is great. It's also very subtle. But I think an argument could be made that it should be a little bit more visual. So let's see. Whenever someone attempts to do something but fails, there are going to be people who are going to call them stupid for missing the things that make them fail. I feel like this movie does a really good job of convincing the audience that spreading the flyers could have worked. They could have gotten away with it. Even though the moment we sit down to watch it, of course we know that it's going to fail. I don't think very many people would have thought of the fact that there are people in the school who are not stuck in classrooms during classes. I'm sure there are people who are going to call the members of the Wet Rose naive for forgetting about the janitorial staff, but the movie does what it can to not give those people ammo. Here we go. Other than staying true to what actually happened, I can see an argument for trimming out the early interrogations where we're led to believe that they believe her. Ultimately, it doesn't really lead to anything other than, I guess, they got some sadistic joy out of it. And I think, I mean, one element is, of course, this was made by Germans, and Germans are very thorough and precise people. And I think for a chunk of it, yeah, they did basically, they took what was in these, the what was written that had been said in the actual situation, and they took a lot of that verbatim. And I think they did a good job. Again, the movie's never visually boring, and the acting's always great. But the yeah, and part of it is also, I mean, again, when you're watching a movie, the fact that part of you wants the scene to end doesn't mean that the scene should end. It might just mean that the filmmakers are accomplishing what they want. They want you. When you watch the interrogations and the show trial, you sit there really hoping that it'll end soon, because it's so just, we hate seeing good people treated so badly. And it's just, but yeah, the movie is doing what it wants to. And I think maybe that's also something, sometimes when if a long time passes between two viewings of this movie for me, sometimes I can start to forget how like when the movie ends, especially with the narration there at the end, it's such a relief. And that really is like the movie is making it feel like this is an ordeal that will never end or will only end very painfully. That was what it was for the members of the White Rose, and the movie reflects that. And that, you again, you can, that is what the filmmakers set out to do. You can make an argument that, maybe you think, and I'm not saying, you're right, you have a right to your opinion, of course. Maybe you think that was the wrong idea, but I think it's very difficult to argue that the movie is not, that, the decisions made while making the movie are in service of that idea. The 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 film is very carefully crafted to feel oppressive. That was the word I was looking for before. It feels oppressive to be stuck in these small, uncomfortable, well, not all of them are comfortable, but, stuck in these rooms, locked up and treated like a criminal. And, maybe there are some people who, well, yeah, obviously there are going to be people who watch this movie and think that the White Rose were just plain wrong. I'm sure that some Nazis have watched the movie, maybe are going to watch the movie in the future. There are Nazis who watch American History X, so yeah, but the vast majority of people who watch the movie are going to be on Sophie's side right from the start. She talks about that people are suffering during the war, which can't be won anyway. A lot of people are suffering, and if the war stops, those people, a lot of that suffering will end. Not obviously not quite all of it. Some of the damage has been done. Some of the people are grievously injured, and there's not anything you can, but you can prevent more people from being injured if you stop the war. That's one thing she talks about. She talks about the mistreatment of Jewish people, and, you know executing handicapped children. So these are things that really just, like, it's like a gut punch, or worse maybe. It's like it's so uncomfortable. It's so unpleasant and that's the idea. The you are it is a laser focus on the final days, and it is putting you in their place and making you feel what they felt in those final days. And I think that is we have a lot of different World War II movies, and I think that remembering people who did nonviolent resistance and the show trials and interrogations and lockup of them, that's not something we always think about. It's I'm not saying, obviously D-Day, that was also incredibly heroic. I'm not saying that that's, like, not as important, but I am saying that that's the one that more people maybe think of. When you say it sure was good that the Allies won World War II, a lot of people are immediately going to think, oh yeah, I watched Saving Private Ryan. Holy crap, that was intense. I'm really glad those people were so heroic. A lot of people aren't going to stop and think, I really appreciate groups like the White Rose. When you some of the reviews, again, I don't blame them. I didn't know the White Rose, but some of the reviews you read of this, it's like people enjoyed the movie a lot, and they're like, I never even heard of these people. And again, I'm not saying you're not wrong if you didn't hear about it, but there are people who could have done more to spread the word about it. And that's part of why they made, the movie was made in part to salute these heroes. But even before that, it's not like people didn't know, it's not like no one knew the group existed until 2005, but the mainstream in a lot of countries did not know. And I do think that is something we have to remember, heroes who risked everything even though they themselves didn't have, guns and such. And again, I'm not saying you're not a hero if you have a gun. I'm saying not, sometimes we need people who don't have, hypothetically, let's say that the White Rose had tried to get, trying to make sure each of them had a gun, and then they went to a Nazi building and tried to kill one of the people in charge or something. Maybe it would have inspired some people, but the ideas certainly inspired a lot of people. And violence doesn't always, you know, once again, 100%, do not misunderstand me, please. World War II could not have been ended without Allied forces going to war against Nazi Germany. That would not have, it, I guess maybe eventually, but it is a huge boon that Allied forces went against, and I don't, if I start listing countries, other countries are going to feel left out. All the Allied forces were, but there, not all, not everyone does grab a gun, and not everyone would make a difference by grabbing a gun. And if you don't grab a gun, but you do write words and spread these ideas, that can be incredibly heroic. Now, let's see. Yeah, another thing. You can really see that it's a movie made by Germans, stereotypically thorough. I think there are a lot of filmmakers who would have, trimmed down the number of different people that Sophie interacts with before she gets to the courtrooms, combine some of the different people. Maybe make it so that the people keeping hold of her personal belongings were the same to interrogate her and to take notes or something like that. I mean, between, like, okay, so they're caught by the janitor. He takes them to the office where they meet, I think, at least two more people, and then Robert comes into it, who takes them to the place where they're going to be locked up, and there they give their personal belongings to yet another person, and then another person takes them to a cell where there is, of course, a cellmate. You didn't, if this was not made, I think those were all based on real people. These were all people that they came into contact with, and ultimately, again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it would have been frustrating if they tried to give all these people very distinct characterizations, but clearly a lot of them are just um, cogs in the wheel. They are doing what they can to make sure that Nazi Germany functions and that no one can spread anti-Nazi sentiment, basically. But if you had a lot of different personalities, maybe, I think that would have gotten very, then it would have been frustrating when we really get into their character and then we don't see it for a long time. Now, if you go into this movie not knowing about the White Rose, it kind of plays like an episode of an American murder mystery or something. You learn new things as detectives uncover it. When Robert is talking about, and again, this is, yeah, like, this would, yeah, basically, if you could very easily turn this into, like, Without a Trace or something. The with like, Robert confronts Sophie about something, and she says something, and then it goes to a flashback of the thing that actually happened Actually, yeah, I guess it might be like that without even narration. But anyway, yeah. So let me think. What was I gonna say there? The Actually, I guess that was it. And right, yeah. Some may consider the judge Ron Freisler to be overplayed. That is what that person was like in real life, which we know from there is eyewitness accounts and documentary footage. I appreciate that the movie doesn't cut directly from the empty university to the White Rose members being interrogated, considering that the movie doesn't show that much and is not that great in scope. You know, dealing with all the extras playing college students was comparatively extravagant, but seeing all those young people who might deep down agree that Hitler should be opposed standing idly by tells you something about how scared people were to oppose him and his rule. You know, there were a lot of young people in countries very heavily affected by Nazi Germany who really were against the Nazis. You know, not everyone, but there were a lot who really, really did not like, yeah. So, yeah. The story of the White Rose is not well known outside of Germany. This may be why they called the movie The Final Days, to make it sound more dramatic, since they named it after a member of this lesser known group. You know, if you have no idea who Sophie Scholl is, and you just hear, you know, oh, there's this movie called Sophie Scholl, you know, I have no idea who that is. You know, it's not going to mean anything to you. But the moment that you see the title, you know, part of the title is The Final Days, you know, you're like, oh, that sounds dramatic. And then, okay, so it's the final days of Sophie Scholl, you know. And yeah, naming it The Final Days does, of course, give away that they don't, in fact, survive. It doesn't bother me, but I can understand why it bothers others. I saw several reviews say that they felt there was a heavy-handed use of music. I'm not sure. I guess to me it was just effective. I don't. I was never really sitting there like, okay, that's a bit much. Let's see. Okay, so the following thing is not going to be very popular. Excuse me. And I went back and forth about whether or not I was going to cover it. But I do think, I'm not going to make a thing of it, but I do think that it was misjudged to treat religion and faith the way it is in this movie. When Sophie invokes God, the interrogator replies, God doesn't exist, which propagates the harmful stereotypes that evil people don't believe in God. They try to justify their evil actions with the claim there is no God, and that they are angered by other people's faith, although, to be fair, this character is angered other times by her statements. And, you know, this, in many cases, has led to abuse of people who have no faith, or just a different faith from the majority. At the end of the day, we can't know for sure, but it is hard to believe that there were no Christians who became Nazis, or that all Nazis hated Christianity, given that their belt buckles said, God is with us, or in German, Gott mit uns. Christianity didn't lead to Nazism, but neither did atheism. And just briefly, in casting Sophie, they both found someone who looks like her, and someone who has incredible talent. Like I said, I'm not sure I've seen her in anything else, but I would love to. Now, let's see. So I tried to find some YouTube videos about the movie. There's one called Badass Women in History, Sophie Scholl. It's just under 5 minutes. It's a good video. It goes into her background, and yeah, well worth watching if you're interested in. Now, there is on YouTube a 55-minute making of for the movie, but it's spoken in German and there are no English subtitles, so I can't comment on it, I'm afraid. And some DVD special features. Let's see, yeah, and I'm afraid some of this also didn't have subtitles in my language, so I can't comment on the words spoken, but yeah, there's a teaser. It is effective enough to be a teaser, even though I don't understand what's being said. It sure does give away a lot of the movie, though. I don't think that I would want someone to watch the teaser who really didn't, basically knew nothing about the events. If you want to go in, if you don't want to know too much about the movie before you watch it, you probably shouldn't watch the teaser first. And yes, I realize that by now I've spoiled most of the movie, but what I'm saying is, if you're watching this and you're considering showing this movie to someone else, you know, consider if you really want to show them the teaser first. And keep in mind, I usually say watch trailers. It is very rare for me to, I try not to go into any movie without having watched at least one trailer, and I find it I often find it frustrating when going into a movie if I haven't watched at least one trailer. I do not like just, having absolutely no idea of anything that's going to come later in the movie. Anyway, and there's also a trailer. Again, it's effective, but it doesn't have subtitles, so I can't comment on any spoken words. And there are interviews. Let's see. So, yeah, the director talks about being inspired by reading the interrogation summaries to make them inspired to make the movie by reading the interrogation summaries. She was the life of the party, and then she was. Let's see. Okay, I do not understand this now. And yeah, they talk about, they read the biographies, and yeah, I didn't make sure to separate this, but I think this is the, excuse me, Julia Jentsch is what I'm gonna guess is how you pronounce it, who plays Sophie in the movie. She read all the biographies, and she said that originally Sophie was apolitical, but she had such sympathy for the victims of the Nazi ideology. It's not political, but it's, yeah, for her it was about the victims. It was a moral obligation, basically. And her father was not happy that there were pictures of Hitler above their heads when they were Hitler Youth, but he figured that they would understand, but he eventually did take the pictures down, and Sophie got a chance to avoid consequences if she implicated her brother and her friend, I believe Christoph, and she said she wouldn't do it. And I'm not entirely certain if this is, I'm not entirely certain who said the following, but someone pointed out that the university where they filmed it is the same university. The flyers were put in the same. I mean, I don't know if it's the exact same spots, but basically the same. Which lent an air of authenticity. And there is, let's see. Oh, never mind. All of that was actually the director. Sorry. Okay, yeah, and then there is, yeah, here we go. This is Julia. Yeah, something. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna skip past butchering the pronunciation any further. But yeah, the actress who plays Sophie, she based her performance on the book, and she said, when you're playing someone who lived, you want to get all the information. Books, biographies, letters, diaries. And she said, yeah, it was a lot of, they gave me information, they interviewed witnesses of the time period, sisters of Sophie. These are one-of-a-kind information. I read the interrogation protocols, but the preparation time was so short that I read the book because the progression history and the emotional development based on it seems, what does that say? Including a lot of dialogues, and yeah, Alexander Helt played Robert, and yeah, they practiced the dialogues beforehand so that, let's see, okay. And yeah, she wanted to give an impression of an idealistic but still normal person who enjoys living, had fun in her life. We didn't want to introduce her as a condemned. It was important to show that your own thoughts can formulate a certain strength. That is what you faced. Suddenly you have to put yourself in another situation, you have to face a decision. She decided to walk her own road, which also demanded vigor, strength, and it shows she is a heroine. Yeah. The let's see, there was something I wanted to, yeah, I think, didn't want to introduce her as a condemned. I think that is very important, yes. There are stories that do focus mainly on the person after, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but I do think it is, again, it tells you something extra that she, you know, uh, as a young person myself, sometimes it can be difficult for us young people to completely understand when someone does something very extreme, something they know there will be consequences to. Sometimes it can be difficult to understand if we never ourselves experienced something very similar. And ultimately, a lot of the people who watch this movie are not going to be people who have gone to prison, but the moment that you show her there, singing along to this, you know, I want to say jazz? I'm not sure. At the start of the movie, not everybody likes jazz, but and obviously, today it's not the radio you're standing next to, but every young person ever has enjoyed music at some point, even if you live with extremely restrictive parents, if you've been able to sneak in some pop music or something, everybody has listened, immediately. It's like, I've done that, and then you see her do something that very few people would do, and you're left thinking, would I be able to do that? And yeah, it's, she is an absolute inspiration. Excuse me. And yes, so Alexander Hilt, who plays Robert Moore. So yeah, the strength of Sophie that she showed in the interrogation was hard for Robert Moore. I think he knew the war was lost and the regime was criminal. However, let's see. Yeah, as a lawman, he was obligated to, to follow the regime. And Yeah, I guess. Oh, right, yeah. There's a little bit more here. I enjoyed working with Julia, although it was maybe because we both come from the theater. I don't know, maybe it was possibly only because of that, but I really liked it because she had to devote herself to the role, and she did really well, and that helped me with my role. Okay, so the let's see, I I don't think I'm going to go for a third section, but I will briefly, I'll try to make it quick. I note when there's something that I badly want to bring up in one of these videos, and there you go. Sometimes I make a lot of these notes. I'm going to try to... Actually, I guess, yeah, I will make the... Okay, so, let's see. And then this section will just maybe be short. IMDb, Wikipedia, and critic sites. So, I believe this is a Rotten Tomatoes review. Julia keeps up a subtle, restrained performance while the movie Nazis around her are screaming themselves red in the face. She succeeds beyond all expectation. Very much. I think that is, yeah, I've already mentioned, I think that is a very powerful contrast in the movie. You really do get the sense that she truly believed, and they had such, they just couldn't handle that someone was actually arguing against. Now, let's see. Okay, I think this is Metacritic. No, wait, no, sorry. It's the Rotten Tomatoes, I think, yeah. Though Scholl's Inquisition and trial are harrowing, there's too little sense of what sort of person Scholl was. We can only grasp at air and guess what it was inside her that drove her to forsake her life in favor of a higher purpose. I think an argument could be made that there should have been a little bit more, you know, they're at the start before she is locked up. And yeah, I think, yeah, if it was a much shorter movie, no, but given that it is long and feels long, not over long, but long, I think it would have been just, yeah, just very, very briefly have a little bit more dialogue, maybe, you know, have them talk about what they recently experienced and what they intend to experience soon, to give us an idea of that sort of, if she's the life of the party, have some, say, you know, yeah, I don't know exactly what, let me briefly think of something. Yeah, maybe her friend says to Sophie, yeah, sorry, Sophie says to her friend, that was a great party Friday or something, and her friend says, when you're there, it's always a great party or something, just the fact that she was the life of the party. I know that because I watched the interviews and there was the YouTube video and such. But if you only watch the movie, you don't know that at all. That is never established. And I do think that is something that, the fact that, yeah, I think something like that, something as, you know yeah. Anyway, I think I said what I wanted to say. And through it all, Jensch is a beacon of bravery and resolve in the darkness of a totalitarian machine. If any actor in an English language film has given a better performance in the past year, I'd like to see it. To shorten the discussions between Moore and Scholl would have been to miss the point. She makes her lasting impression on Moore and us not by violence or cacophony, but by the persistence, patience, and persuasiveness of her intellectual discourse, and that's very true. And like I said, I don't think it should have been trimmed down. I understand the argument for it, and maybe they should make another movie about her and make the other movie about her in this more trimmed down fashion. But I gave it an 8 out of 10. I love the movie as it is. Excuse me. And let's see. The courage to act as she and her colleagues did in the worst possible scenario should inspire anyone of whatever political stripe to speak out before it gets to the point where her story could possibly be a true one. And offers the rousingly cathartic spectacle of a young woman who stood up and did what the country has been accused for 70 years of failing to do. To its face, she told Hitler's Third Reich to shove it. Now, I'm going to read the following. I don't really agree with it, but I guess I can see what Bruce means by this. A powerful, valid, and worthy exercise, to be sure, but not emotional, and emotions are the fuel of cinema. I agree with those last 5 words. I do find it emotional, but I guess I can see why not everyone would. Elegant in its moral and artistic simplicity, Julianne creates a deeply human portrait of a courageous young woman at a moment when that kind of courage seemed in terribly short supply. Director Rothman and screenwriter Fred Breinersdorfer have locked themselves into an episodic structure that offers virtually no nuance. See, that is definitely, this was Christy Lemieux. She's made a number of very great observations in her movie reviews. I've been very happy to read them. I do think that is, it's, I don't think that the movie is bad for it, but for sure it is a movie. I can see a lot of people not watching the entire thing, and I do think that's too bad. Again, I don't think this movie should have been made differently, but I think an argument could be made. It's 15 years old now. Maybe, yeah, maybe an American production should tell the same story, but more visually, trim it down. I think that might be a good thing, even though that movie might not necessarily be better than this. The director Mark Rothman has kept the unbridled horror of the Nazi period carefully tamped down. The prospect of inescapable doom that hangs over the heads of the 3 main characters is horrific enough. I agree. That is very... This movie could very easily have shown a lot of awful Nazi, activity, and Germans have made movies that show a lot of it. But in this, it really is yeah, very well put. The inescapable doom is yeah. The sentence against her is carried out with startling promptness. Because of the movie's title, we are not surprised, but we are jolted. That was Ebert. Rest in peace. The movie reminded me of one of those books for young readers that skims the surface, taking care to avoid any material that might contradict or confuse. I mean, I guess I can see a little bit what Chris is saying by that. I don't really agree. Yeah, see, I made a note if I could. I mean, personally, I mean, yeah, you have the Nazi atrocities, and you have Sophie's personality from before she was caught. Is there that much else that's very? I don't know. Maybe he knows more about the historical than I do. Now, let's see. As usual, I definitely suggest you read the reviews yourself. Some really great reviews. I didn't. There weren't very many reviews that I read of this that were like really frustrating to read, as is sometimes the case. I should briefly note, I did only, for the IMDb reviews, I only read like the first page worth, or sorry, the first 5 pages worth, I think it was. I didn't read all of them. I don't know if, the top, the ones, give me a second. The ones rated the most, voted most useful, the top 25 of those were the ones I read. And I only read the synopses of the, excuse me, Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic. I'm only on the 29th of 252 of these, so I think I'm gonna try to hurry a little bit more. Let's see. Now, plays like one of the better Law and Order episodes. Kind of, yeah. Yeah, maybe Law and Order is a better comparison than Without a Trace. And I Sophie Scholl, The Final Days may sound like a history lesson, but don't be fooled. It's a horror film. And I think that might be about it for the first chunk of these. Some did feel like the movie has heroic posturing in place of real people. Like I said, I feel like it does enough to avoid that. And not everybody loves the movie, and I do think that some of the points made against it are, let's see, yes, some of them make points that I partially agree with, can see. Let's see. Now, okay, and here we go. Okay, so now I'm into the the Rotten Tomato user reviews. Now, yeah, one user review said that there are too many shots of, and got like heavy-handed. The what's the word? You know, the shots of Sophie looking out windows at, you know, freedom. Proof you can make a tense and emotional film based solely on characters and ideas. That's very true. I mean, if you just read about what this is like, you wouldn't think that it was an emotionally effective movie. At least I can understand people who would read about it and think, well, that can't be very, because it's people talking. You know, the like I said, we see no violence, and the violence that we're told about, we don't get an extreme amount of like description of violence. Now, let's see. Okay, and here we go with the Metacritic Pro reviews. Now, right, that's 5 day is, yeah, 5 days is the entire, is, or is it 5 days in prison? I'm not 100% sure, but yeah. Though we know the story's final outcome, the trial scene and its aftermath are no less shocking and affecting. Wow, I marked almost every single one of these. Yeah, I'm gonna have to skip through. Okay, here we get to the Metacritic user reviews. So I am gonna go ahead and skim. Okay, IMDb trivia. The film was shot in chronological order. I think that is a very, I think that, you know, some movies can't be. I think most movies can't be. And that's not a, you know, that doesn't mean that those movies are bad for not being shot in chronological order. But it is a very, movies like this that are so intimate and close, it can be very effective for them when they can shoot it in chronological order. And, you know, actually, let's see. Right, for a movie like this, it can really help the you know, you there is a certain, it feels natural to, there are a lot of things about acting that are artificial by design. It's impossible for acting to have no artifice. When you can do the scenes in chronological order, it, the actors can let it disappear more into the material. And I think this, yeah, IMDb, excuse me, IMDb user reviews. Let's see. I apologize for the dead air. I'm trying to do better at not marking every single thing. It's just, the thing is, there are a lot of different reviews, a lot of different people wrote interesting things separately from each other. Now, and I realize that does bring up the question, why don't I just remove the stuff that I don't feel like, okay, this is definitely something I want to comment on. The thing is, I would be very worried that I accidentally removed something that I would end up wishing was still there. And I acknowledge and apologize that that does mean there are, yeah, that does mean that sometimes there's dead air as I, let's see, as I scroll through and skim. But it's, I guess I might not be more that. There are some who didn't like it, say it moved too slow, there were too many interrogations. Now, and that was all of it. So I am gonna, yeah, and I realize by most standards this is not a short video, but for me this is a very short video, and it's simply that logistically it doesn't make sense for me to do a video where I'm not sitting in the same spot for the duration of the video, but my back really does not do well with, sitting still for so long. And given Corona, I'm not complaining. There are other people who have it far worse than I, but it is a thing. It, basically, it's for, I'm fortunate enough to, I haven't been infected, and the people I come most into contact with haven't been infected. But basically, for me to get treatment for my back, I do, I have gotten treatment since, since even, fairly recently, since Corona got really bad, and, you know, self-quarantine, social distancing, and all that. But basically, in addition to not being infected and not being in contact with those who have been, basically, for me to get an appointment, to get treatment, you know, my pain has to be excruciating, it has to be unbearable. Then I can get an appointment. And thankfully we are getting, you know, those of us who do get to the point of excruciating pain, we do get treatment when it reaches that. But that's why my videos are, you know, I guess until Corona is very much under control in my country, my videos are gonna continue to be this length. And, you know, I don't know if that, you know, if a lot of people are disappointed that my videos are short now, shorter. By no means is a 2-hour, 11-minute video short. But that is why. And yes, I realize that I'm starting to look like I am not intentionally growing out my beard. I just, my wrists are also part of, you know, I can't get treatment for that if I'm not experiencing excruciating pain. And shaving, you know, it's not something you think about when, you know, if you don't have wrist pain or you can get frequent treatment for wrist pain, you don't think about it. But yeah, shaving, you know, it does take, it does, yeah, it can make your wrist pain worse, basically. But yeah, I'm gonna try to shave more before next time. I really don't. I'm not fond of appearing in public with this much facial hair. If you do, that's perfectly fine. I personally don't. I don't think it's not for me. But that is it for this video, and I hope you enjoyed watching, as I enjoyed watching and recording, and I'll catch you next time.